And that,
I've had social anxiety disorder since I was a child, and I can say that I wasn't diagnosed until I was in the military, when it was reactivated from my time in the military. So that type of thing you can have since you're a child, but the military allows for me to have social anxiety disorder because it was aggravated by the military.
interesting. Okay. All right.
No
So
loopholes.
this is you cannot imagine how important this is. And one of the things about this show is not just the transparency, and I appreciate you talking about your own personal experience and what you're going through. You're kind of going against the whole HIPAA regulations. But
you can talk about it if you want to, and you can. There's no don't ask, don't tell here.
Exactly. And that's kind of the rules of this show, because there is a wealth of people out there that listen. I got right now, and I'm not trying to plug the show, but we've already crossed over 3 something thousand subscribers on YouTube, and a whole lot more on our podcast, which means that people are listening. And it's important that we can try to share this, because hopefully there's somebody out there who's probably calling their therapist as we speak. So that's important. All right. So let's talk a little bit about your legislative efforts. Before we go into some of your challenges, can you give us a background how you ended up, sort of coming a legislative advocate? You're no longer in the military, and yet you're still out there, it feels like, on the front lines fighting for people like yourself and me and anybody else who's actually been victim, those that are active, etc. Talk about how you kind of came into this, and then, of course, some of your biggest challenges.
Okay, so I've always been a government nerd, and with rules and regulations and legislative things, and then coming into sexual assault and sexual harassment, a lot of the rules and regulations are coming out of Congress, and also from the DoD on specific rules. So that's how I really got into it. But when the situation of Vanessa Guillen was coming up, a lot of grassroots movements have been getting collected and coming together and pretty much talking together on how to protest. And that's how I got in touch with a few of the women with the Military Women's Coalition. And with the legislative process, I really got into in deep myself, and to understand what rules that we can actually make a change in, how we can make it better for the next person or make it better for the veterans that we already have. That was one of the initiatives that I've always taken upon myself in my military career. I wanted to get to the next rank, so then I can make it better for other people, so I don't have to, so I'm not the only one, or I'm the last one to go through this, is what I meant to say. So no one else can go through what I went through.
Right. Right. So it's not just a personal thing. It's a mission. It's a purpose. Now, is this a full-time job for you? Are you employed, or are you doing this voluntarily? What's kind of the status with doing this?
So technically I am, I'm paid as 100% disabled because I have migraines about 2 or 3 a week from a TBI I had that wasn't actually diagnosed until about 6 or 7 years later. We didn't know what TBIs were, traumatic brain injuries.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then I started getting migraines years later from actually having more traumatic brain injuries. And so I am disabled. I don't work, but this is a volunteer thing for me. And I work from my house, and I put this together. So I will say, though, from the Vanessa Guillen, when the Vanessa Guillen bill came out, there was only 88 co-signers or co-sponsors for that bill.
Oh.
For the House, you need 219.
Yeah.
So what came on in the Women Veterans Facebook group is that we were trying to get people to volunteer, to call their representatives, to actually sign up for this bill. We also started with the senators as well, because at the same time, since it was such a short amount of time for the bill to stay alive, they did a companion bill, which means that they would introduce it in both houses. And as long as they get voted on with the same amount, with the same language, they'll get approved together at the same time and then go to the president for signature. Well, that didn't happen, but what we did was that we got together and we put together call scripts, we put together letters and templates for people to volunteer themselves to actually contact their congresspeople. And one example that I like to use is that congresspeople will listen to their constituents. Mm-hmm. Back when Sandy Hook was a big thing and they were putting in a bill for gun control, this one representative who did not disclose his name, but he's from a very red district and very red state, he asked his staff how many people was against this bill. And it was basically everyone but one person. One person wanted the bill. And because of that one person, he voted for gun control.
What?
He wanted to be able to support everyone, but since there was one person that believed that they needed the bill, he went for it.
Wow.
Things happen, things changes because of the power of the constituents. When there was anti-privacy laws that was being submitted through for Facebook, for international IP addresses, and those type of things that's been going on, there was a bill to remove the privacy controls, and so then they can actually put in a subpoena for IP addresses overseas to catch crime. Which sounds like a good thing, but the thing is that you're also getting into privacy laws.
Exactly, right.
So when that passed the House, when it went to the Senate, that's when the constituents found out. And the constituents told their senators, you better not be voting for this bill, and the bill died.
The bill died, right? I remember that. Yes. Yeah, people don't like what is the phrase, the daddy or big daddy? What's the term they use? They don't know what big daddy or somebody watching. I forgot the term.
Yeah, I can't remember the term.
When I first started, I remember that we used to hear that a lot. What are some of your biggest challenges as an advocate for legislation? I mean, is it the frustration of how long it takes? Is it the frustration of trying to get somebody to listen and hear the importance? Is the frustration that you put in all this work and something dies because somebody is just not really grasping the purpose? I mean, what is it? Some of your biggest challenges or frustrations?
All of the above. Well, I'll tell you this. So veterans themselves, they don't believe that they have an impact. A lot of veterans, because they went through the military and you were always, you're the Joe Schmo and you don't have very much power, because majority of them were probably E5 and below, sergeants and below. And you don't have a whole lot of power at that rank. And if you have toxic leadership and bad commanders, and they're allowed to stay bad and allowed to do things that were not very kosher, then pretty much you feel powerless. And that's a lot of feelings. So veterans also don't want to talk about politics because they've been turned off by the polarizing politics that's been happening lately. My family was split 50-50 when Obama was voted in. And I was thankfully deployed, so I wouldn't have to be there for Thanksgiving. I also feel them for the politics fighting.
Right.
So that is also frustrating. And then what Diana Danis, my mentor, has always been telling me is that legislative change is cumulative. It's a little bit, and then you get a little bit, and then you get a little bit. So just having the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act introduced last year was a huge step. because it was the most progressive, and it got everybody talking about it and talking why they need it. So that is the frustrating part, is it did die, while other bills did not. And they weren't actually as big or media, they weren't in the media very often. The Tally Act. I love the Tally Act. The Tally Act is a very good thing. It's about informing the veterans of what happens with their medical disabilities and things like that. That bill passed, which is great, and I'm so proud of Bryant Tally that had gotten that.
Yeah, yeah.
But the Vanessa Guillen Act did not pass, and so it's one of those little frustrating things. It does take a long time, and right now the focus is on COVID, passing people in the cabinet for President Biden, and then the impeachment for President Trump. So that's been the focus right now. So trying to maintain the focus for reintroducing the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act will also take some challenges.
Well, the good news is, like we mentioned earlier, Biden was VP at the time. So, we can kind of hold it. We got a good 3.5 years. So hopefully we'll get a chance to get that in there before he goes anywhere. You talked about the having access to our medical records. One thing got through, one thing didn't get through. But it takes me back to when I was an intern working at City Council up in Sacramento, and I remember how some of the water cooler or backdoor conversations went about, where you do this for me, I'll do this for you, and it makes me think maybe that was one of those type of circumstances. So let's hope that we can get there, and with podcasts like this. And I will actually title this under Vanessa's name. So with all the hashtags and all the opportunities, and of course, letting people know your website, which, by the way, is www.valqrf, which is Legislative Quick Response Force. That's Victor Alpha Lima, Quebec Romeo Foxtrot.org. And we're going to put that on the website, on our YouTube channel, so everybody can know about it. And it'll be on all of our social media. So you're going to be hashtagged a lot. So if you start noticing things, that's probably coming from this podcast.
Yes, my Instagram has been popping up. Dr. Bryant has tagged me. Dr. Bryant has tagged me.
All right. That's great. Absolutely. That's great news to hear. All right. So as we wrap this up, I want to ask one more thing. So again, we mentioned the legislative response information. So that's actually a project. So let's get into that, because that is so important. So I don't want to let you leave without talking a little bit more about this project. So why don't you explain to us about the Veteran Legislative Quick Response Force?
Okay, so for that group and for the website, I'm including spotlighted bills that could help veterans and also the current military. I'll be including call scripts and templates. So then veterans and military, or even supporters of veterans and military, could call their own congressman, leave a message, send them an email, and tell them, hey, I want you to vote for this bill. I want you to co-sponsor it. So then we can pass it, and the reasons why we need to pass it. And all of that information will be in one-stop shop on one website. Because originally we were doing it on a Facebook group, which is not the best organized for having all of that paperwork and all of that stuff and the documentation. Another thing that I'm trying to get together is putting in a lot of statistics. And one of the statistics, and I've talked about one of the statistics prior for the DoD SAPR program, is about the retaliation. Another big one for sexual harassment is only 1% of all of those that were sexually harassed actually file a complaint.
Wow.
So here I'll have, and this was out of 2018, and so more men were technically sexually harassed in FY18. That's 68,550 men out of the military. And for the women, it's 52,231.
Wow, those numbers are staggering.
And one of the things that I also believe, which relates to the men, is it's the thing with victims, that they don't see themselves as a victim. They don't see it as sexual harassment towards themselves.
Right.
And one of the things when I used to teach is that I would actually go through some of the examples of actual sexual harassment that turns into hazing for men.
Right.
Would you allow me to say a few of those ones?
No, if you hadn't, I was going to actually kind of talk about my own personal, but thank you for bailing me out. So go ahead and you talk about some.
So it happens, and you see it on a lot of frat situations. It's
Mhm.
teabagging. Teabagging is technically sexual harassment. And there was a situation at Fort Hood where they would use it as an initiation for the first people of an organization. I will not say, because if I say what type of organization, it might point it out. But they found out because somebody fought against it, and the other person had very terrible bleeding. They actually ruptured an artery. So that's also one. And then you would also see it probably in PT formations is popping the men's genitals off the cock.
Right.
And that's another sexual harassment situation. So any touching of his genitals or the other person's genitals without consent is technically sexual harassment, and also sexual assault if you actually get into it.
Right.
Because there is the touching involved.
And the irony is that you don't even know that it falls under that label because you're under the camouflage impression that it's hazing. Oh, okay, they're just initiating me. They're testing my strength. They want to see if I'm going to be a part of the brotherhood. Am I going to hang in there? I get it. I absolutely get it, but I didn't get it at the time.
Yes, and then when the military, specifically the Army, really stamped down on hazing practices, sexual harassment complaints by men dropped. So there is a correlation between the two. And another very common thing for men is for sexual harassment that that the perpetrator is also their superior or higher in rank.
Oh, of course, absolutely. Who else got the authority to do that, to see if you're man enough to be in that unit? You know, when I remember years ago, in our early stages of Iraq, and we had some issues with soldiers doing things they weren't supposed to do in jails with some of our captured enemy. I'm going to say, but I'm trying to be as vague and blanket as possible because I really don't want to identify certain groups of the forces of our
I know
armed
exactly
forces.
what you're talking about.
Okay, so yeah, so you know, when I saw that, you know, it was interesting because one of the things that they tried to bring light to was the issue at hand, the hazing and all that. But the problem is we still continued, especially behind closed doors. I think we just, and I say we because I'm a military, not saying that I did it, but I tried not to separate myself from my brothers and sisters because we are all in this together. And I hope to continue to believe that because it's important for us to help those who probably didn't even know what they were doing. You know, you're a victim, and then sometimes you become an NCO, then you're going to keep passing the torch.
Yes.
So we're in this together. But my point is that you just got better at either hiding it because of some of the attention that came through in the media. But I think what it is that we still feel, as in speaking as a victim, we still feel that was it still required of me to go through this because I had to prove something? You know, I can't help but to take myself back and think about some of the circumstances. And I was in a special ops unit. I had to prove myself from, there's one thing to have basic and AIT and then airborne school and then the Ranger indoctrination program. But it's another thing when you get to Ranger Battalion, you're still proving yourself every single day. And so when you go through certain situations that are very familiar with what you had said, you're thinking, okay, I just doing my part. And they did this. They had to go through it as well. So if I'm going to be accepted, I have to accept this.
Yes.
And that's very unfortunate.
Yes. And then another thing that happens a lot of times is there's a myth that if you observe sexual harassment, but it wasn't on you, that you can't file a complaint, that only the victim can file a complaint. And I've had to a lot of classes to inform a lot of people, because there was situations in companies where the male NCOs would actually realize what another male NCO was doing towards the junior enlisted women. And they, instead of actually report it, they were just trying to make sure and keep him away from the women. Which, I mean, it is, at least they did that, but it also perpetuated the situation that what he's doing is still okay and still all right. And so those type of situations are out there, and a lot of education needs to happen, and that is not happening, because one of the things that they realized when they came out of the independent review from Fort Hood was that the training is redundant, it hasn't changed, and it's mostly of just the PowerPoints to flip the chart, just trying to sign and get through on your annual training. So that type of thing happens still. It's a check the block, not an actual conversation with your subordinates or even your coworkers about what is sexual harassment, what is sexual assault, and why is it not acceptable.
You know, that's actually, I have not, like yourself, I'm 100%. So I haven't actually been fully engaged in any of my previous employments. But when I was with the federal government, I remember doing that literal video and then going through it and then just basically clicking some sort of virtual signature and it goes in the system and that's it. And honestly, there was no accountability, because I could have just fast forward. All right, I'm good, and click and move on to my job. So yeah, check the box. You mentioned call scripts on this website. What exactly is call scripts? I'm pretty sure there's some people who may not understand what that is.
Well, call script, it's a script of how you can speak to your congressman or just the staff of the congressman. Most likely you're going to talk to a staff member.
Yeah, right.
Or an unpaid intern that's probably still in their bachelor college path. And it gives you a script of how to say what you want to say on how to convince the congressperson to vote for the bill.
Yeah. Okay. So this, again, everybody, this is hugely important. You can see this on her website. Again, I want to remind everybody that's VALQRF.org. All right. That's Veteran Legislative Quick Response Force. Go to her website, get access to this information, save it in your browser, and basically do what you can to support it. Any last words, Stephanie, for our audience before I let you go?
No, I think we're good.
We gave a lot of information, and I'm really excited to get this out. I'm going to talk to the production team and the editors. We're going to expedite this. I want to make sure this is available. You and I will continue to talk offline. This is hugely important to Vanessa's family out there. If you get a chance to listen to this, I want to say, my apologies, but I'm here to help and support in any way I can. And hopefully we will see some change in our military. That is the most important. We have generations and generations to go. My son is active duty right now. And I can't imagine for him to have to experience or go through anything. And he's actually serving in a frat type unit. But there is no, and you can attest to this, you're just not sure where. There's no color barrier. There's no, racial barrier. There's no MOS barrier. I mean, it covers all spectrums. So I do keep my concerns. I do check in with them, and it's important. But there's other kids and daughters and sons out there. We have the next generation. So we need to make things better for them. We absolutely do. So, and on that note, Stephanie, I want to thank you. You have not only your personal sacrifice, but you're also still involved. You didn't give up, and you're still out there fighting. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Yeah, when you have a disability like mine, you have to find something to give yourself purpose every day, so you can get yourself up and moving. And from other people that I know that also have similar disabilities or also unemployed because of their disabilities, you got to find something to give yourself purpose, and this is it.
That's why we're doing this podcast. That's why I'm here. This is exactly why I'm doing this. All right. So that's our show. Thank you so much, Stephanie, again, you guys can have access to her link. It'll be on the YouTube channel. It'll be available on the podcast. Remember, the goal is to ensure we maintain a level of communication to support one another. That's what this show's about. We need to understand next steps. We have to be a resource. We help one another navigate through challenging situations. So on that note, to all my veterans and families out there, be blessed. Please be blessed, because you are. And know that I am speaking to you. But more importantly, someone is always listening. And I say that because I don't want you to give up. Somebody is listening. And that someone is not just me. It's people like Stephanie. That is my show. My name is Dr. Bryant. I want to thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Dr. Bryant Speaks. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please locate others on all the popular podcast channels and YouTube under Dr. Bryant Speaks, and go to the website at DrBryantSpeaks.com for the latest info.